Uh, One bit, it was a less complete from the beginning. Someone mentioned the other day, well, what happened in Guatemala? And so when I was 3 weeks a Margi, I went on this trip to Guatemala, and I had the Virabai Mudra picture for sixth lesson. By Baba's grace, I detected the power, then the energy coming off this image, and this fell into my possession. So I began to do sadhana every day in front of it, pretty early in the morning. I was with a group of travelers, but had quite a bit of my own space. We did Spanish study, so I had my own room. And 4 weeks later, we had done 2 weeks of Spanish study. We started to walk for 3 days and 2 nights through the mountains, through these villages. And I'll never forget waking up in the morning before everybody was awake and going out into nature. It was foggy and the sun was rising, and I would meditate in front of that photo. And then in the evening, the same before supper. And so they knew I was doing this thing. Hey, Bhavani. And we arrived at this place, Lago Atitlan. And I'm reflecting on this because there's this special magic to it, to looking back. And I detected something that when I would do my sadhana, this intense reverence and gratitude would just come up, and I would become very quiet. And when my sadhana would go down, or when I was away from it, or miss it in those early days, then this cynicism would come back like that. It's a cultural thread, I think, in certain countries, certainly America, where I grew up. Sarcasm, cynicism, it's very deadening. So it was like a night and day. It was like the flip of a light switch. So when we arrived in this town of Panajachel, I had this intense clash that was coupled with a desire for Margi Satsanga. Now, I'd only been a Margi for 7 weeks, but I had already done a fasting day, and I was quite steeped in it, just right into it. It came to a head, and I thought, I don't know if I can stay for another 4 weeks with this group, because they were doing normal things that 20-year-olds do, and I was striking off on a new path. So I had such a desire for satsang with Margis. So we took a boat to the next place we'd be for 2 weeks, called San Marcos La Laguna, and we were supposed to stay there for 2 weeks and do this meditation, spiritual training. I may say a word about that in a minute. The place we were to stay was La Paz Vegetarian Restaurant. And on the board, the chalkboard, it said, Todo es amor, Bhavanam Kevala. One of the sisters there, her mom had been a Margi in the 70s. And she'd said, hey, look. So she brought my attention to it, and I melted. But I thought, who is running this place? I had yet to meet them. A couple of days later, we were doing asanas in the morning, a class. And I reflected, these seem like Ananda Marga asanas, Sarvangasana, fish, twist. And I was aware that when we were doing shoulder stand, my Langota strap maybe was showing. And sure enough, after the class, this tall Guatemalan brother walked up to me like this and said, my brother. So he had seen the Langota strap and knew I was a Margi, and my desire was fulfilled. So it was very special, reflecting back all these years. So his name was Vishwabandhu. He turned out to be a driver for Baba during his international trips. He lived in Europe for a bit, so he was driving, I think, Baba in Europe. And he lived there. So it became a very blissful, from that clash to the bliss. I just had such an overwhelming sense of universalism and my desire being fulfilled. This spiritual training we were supposed to be doing as part of the travel turned out to be junk, and all of the students nixed it. It was very odd. I don't need to say more about it. The other experience there in that little town for those 2 weeks is as follows. Vishwabandhu, of course, knew Dada Kripananda in Guatemala City, so he invited him to come for a program. And I kept asking, oh, when's Dada coming? When's Dada coming? Oh, he's still thinking about his bus over here. It's a lot to do. So meanwhile, I was doing a lot of sadhana in that little town. The students didn't want to do that meditation course at a different place. So one night I was walking around the town and it was dark, tropics, and not a lot of electric lights, and sunsets right pretty early. And this kirtan melody came into my mind like this, and I don't know if I had heard it in the only Dharma Chakra I had been to in Los Angeles. There had been two, rather. Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam. Now I'll say something about that melody. There's a story about it relating to some Australians that I heard just yesterday. When Dada came, Kripananda, he wanted to do a Prachar program. 30 or 40 people came. He said, you need to lead the kirtan. I said, well, I've never led kirtan. I don't know if I can do that. He said, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I led with that one. And I related this story the other day, and somebody said, there's a story relating to that melody. Do you know it? It was in 1980. In India, Baba was going for a field walk out, and he rolled down his window, and one Dada went running over because he said this to this group of Margis and a Dada over there, don't you know any Spanish songs? And Dada said, I don't know. He ran over to him. Do you know any Spanish songs? None of them spoke Spanish. But there were two Australians in the group, and they said, well, we've been to Spain. Let us think. And they remembered this song, Todos Juntos. It's a protest song that they would sing in Chile against the Pinochet regime. So when Baba came back, they sang Todos Juntos. It's a very sweet song. You can look it up on YouTube. And then at the end, they went into Baba Nam Kevalam. So the next thing is I landed back for LFT training. And over the next 2 years, I did go to India. I guess I was good enough in LFT the third season. I went with my Acharya to India for 40 days in the spring. I did my LFT training with Shantatmananda. Very saintly Dada, just brings tears in my eyes to think about him. And reflecting back, looking back is very powerful. I'm happy that you're doing these because mostly I'm always thinking about the present and the future. And I get this overwhelming sense that I was just being carried throughout all of my herky-jerky existence. All the insults and injuries, all the clash, all the coming and going. Mostly now I'm just going. I'm coming. I'm not going anymore. But so I went to India and I met Karunananda, Keshavananda, Chidananda. Later on, my LFT, I met Ramananda, and all these very personal experiences with these senior Dadas right before they passed. And the first sectoral retreat I attended, I just felt such a sense of being at home. And they played the Baba video and everybody's chasing his car. I mean, that's the feeling I'm getting every Sunday before Dharma Chakra. Or if there's an Akanta Kirtan, I have to be there. I can't not be there. And so I have a message to the Margis of my generation who did not meet Baba physically that you don't have to worry about having missed him because he spread himself all over the universe before he came to the earth and is still doing that. So we can meet him inside almost any time we want to. So I think it's mostly a personal thing but many of the folks that you're having on have met Baba physically, and that's the sweetest thing. We can plunder all of that grace by listening to these stories, by reading the books. This is really important. And we can meet Baba inside, but we can also meet him outside, because Ananda Marga is a mission. It's vast. It has 42 trades. There's so many opportunities to just serve, to just work, remember his name in our sadhana, and drift in bliss. There's that saying. It's very, very potent. There's all these reminders. So these stories, the personal stories, we have personal reminders. Then we read satsanga. Those are reminders. And remember that we are arousing the sleeping humanity. Baba came for so many things, but he came for one purpose: to arouse the sleeping humanity with a Hladini Shakti force that will spread like wildfire. So whatever is going to come this year for us personally, next year for all of humanity, there's work to be done. And no matter what our past is, to others we may seem very crooked, but when we do pranam to Baba, we are straight as an arrow, inside her and outside.